Theory is a structured set of statements used to explain or predict a set of facts or concepts. In other words, theory is an idea used to account for a situation or justify a course of action. Like for an example, Darwin theory of evolution. Moral theory explains why a certain action is wrong or why we ought to act in a certain ways. In addition, it is a theory of how we determine right and wrong conduct. For example, parents have an obligation to take care of their children. Moral theories have two parts. The first, consequentialism, and the moral subjectivism. First, we will discuss about the consequentialism. Consequentialism only the consequences or outcomes of actions matter morally. It can also lead to decisions that are objectionable even though the consequences are arguably good. Moral subjectivism. It is the right and wrong is determined by what you, the subject, just happens to think or feel is right or wrong. In addition, amount to be denial or moral principles of any significant kind, and the possibility of moral criticism and argumentation. There are 8 types of moral subjectivism. So first, we will discuss about the first types, the simple subjectivism. It is the view that ethical statements reflect sentiments, personal preferences, and feelings rather than objective facts. For example, Nietzsche thinks abortion is moral, whereas Dan thinks abortion is immoral. Individualist subjectivism. The view originally put forward by Protagoras that there are many distinct scales of good and evil as there are individuals in the world. For example, so if I say murder is wrong, I am simply saying I am disapprove of murder. Third, moral relativism or ethical relativism. This is the view that for a thing being morally is right is for it to be approved of by society, leaving the conclusion that different things are right for people in different societies and different period in history. For example, eating pork. In Judaism, there is a rule against eating any animals that does not have split or hooves or does not show their
Number
gut.
4. Ideal observer theory. The view that what is right is determined by the attitudes that a hypothetical ideal observer, a being who is perfectly rational, imaginative, and informed, would have. So ideal observer theory falls into the metaethics branch, the language and concepts of morality, and asks what to do we mean by saying something is good or evil. What does it mean to be morally right or morally wrong? What makes an action moral or immoral is down to the approval or disapproval of a hypothetical morally perfect observer, otherwise known as an ideal observer. So for example, Joanna is better than Johanny. So we often seem to go wrong in our moral judgments because we have false beliefs, lack crucial information, are based in our own favor, inconsistent. Number 5. Ethical egoism. Right and wrong is determined by what is in your self-interest, or it is immorally to act contrary your self-interest, usually based on psychological egoism that we by nature act selfishly rather than we will ideally act so as to maximize our self-interest. So ethical egoism is a theory that is based on self-interest, that pursuit of self, and that it is ethically correct since the theory assumes that everyone acts in their own self-interest. Next, it is a subset of teleological theory, so that ethical theory is a normative theory which it focuses on how people should or ought to behave, the consequences and outcomes of a decisions rather than on intention. We should not confuse with psychological egoism, because it describes how people actually behave, while ethical egoism or normative theory describes how people should behave, a study of behavior. It is okay or acceptable to make a decisions or choose an action that benefit oneself. Number 6, utilitarianism. So it is a theory of consequences. Utilitarianism first popularized by British philosophers Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill in the 19th century. It is a theory that holds that the best way to make a moral decision is to look at the potential consequences of each available choice. Then one should pick the option that either does the most to increase happiness or does the less to increase suffering. Utilitarianism, also known as consequentialism, that often summed up as a philosophy of the greatest good for the greatest number. So, it is a minimum happiness ang pinipili natin. Any action that doesn't produce happiness is morally wrong in utilitarianism. Kapag ang ginagawa mo ay hindi nagreresulta ng happiness mo, it is not tagged or it is not considered as morally right. Actions are morally persuaded or permissible if and only if they produce happiness. So, ang mga actions ay nagiging morally right kapag they produce happiness. It is in utilitarianism. For example, doctor have 5 dosage of medicines and we have 6 patients. One patient needs 5 medicines to live and the 5 patients needs 5 each medicines to live. If the doctor give the 5 dosage medicine sa isang pasyente, mamamatay ang 5 patients. But if the doctor give the 5 dosage of medicines sa 5 kapasyente, mabubuhay ang 5 but mamamatay ang isa. So if we're going to use utilitarianism in this example, the doctor will choose saving the 5 patients using the 5 dosage of medicines because 5 dead will cause more suffering, right? Mas mahirap tanggapin ang 5 mamamatay kaysa sa isang mamamatay. Saving the 5 patients, increasing the happiness in its result, diba? It maximizes the happiness. In utilitarianism, palagi mong pinipili ang consequences of your action should result into a greater happiness. Nagiging morally right ang isang bagay kapag mas masaya ka doon. That in utilitarianism. So, also known as deontological. So, it is a duty-based moral philosophy. Rules about the act themselves states that society needs rules in order to function and that a person can only be called moral to the extent that he abides by those rules. So, for example, in the profession of teaching. So, teachers, they study the code of ethics. Yun ang sinusunod nila in order to be an effective and efficient teacher. So, it is applied in deontology. It is a set of rule na kapag sinusunod ng bawat tao, it is considered as moral. 8. Virtue ethics, or always improve ourselves. So, it focuses of being good person. So, if you are a good person with good characteristics, right action will follow to you. So, kapag mabuti kang tao sa theory na ito, ang mga balak mong gawin will be tagged as morally right because a person here is virtuous. So, virtuous means know what to do and understand what you're doing. So, virtue ethic states that only good people can make good moral decisions. So for example, in virtue, there is a left and right angles. So the virtue is center. It is called a golden minute because it is in a right amount balance, not too much and not too little. In left side, it has a vice defect deficiency or kulang. On the right side is the vice excess or sobra. If you are a virtuous person, you know how to balance being a courageous person by practicing being honest, brave, just, generous, and so on. 3 main elements of virtue ethics. First is eudaimonism. It is a classical formulation of virtue ethics. So eudaimonism have 3 kinds. First is eudaimonia, or also known as happiness, well-being, or good life. So, eudaimonia can be seen as an objective, not subjective. So, meaning makita na nato ni siya as makita na nato ni siya through our observation, not stated to the person or others. Next is arete, also known as the virtues. Next is pronesis, or practical wisdom, to resolve any conflicts or dilemmas which might arise. Number 2 is ethics of care. It goes for a change in how we view morally and the virtues. So, example niya is The Feminine and Masculine by Carol Gilligan. So, ethics of care have 2 kinds. First is agent-based theory. Give an account of virtue based on our common sense institutions about which character traits are admirable. Second is the theory of human rights, or also known as human rights, that every person is endowed with certain inalienable rights, such as the right to life, the right to own property, and the right to liberty. So, the theory of natural rights, dito ay pinapahalagahan natin ang ating sarili or we as a human because it is a human right and human rights are found in constitutions, right? Every constitutions are enclosed with human rights because you are protecting the citizens or mga nabuyo sa country. We are protecting the human against the moral wrongs. So in the right to life, the dilemma here is the pushing of group of people to legalize abortion. So kay balumanta nga abortion is illegal. So the dilemma is there. Right to life, so it conflicts to the human right. The right to life, the right of the baby to live, or the fetus to live, or the blood to live because it is under the human right. And in the right to liberty, freedom of expression. Kaya may mga rally because it falls under the right to liberty. Liberty, because we have the right to say what we want to say or speak out. And in the right to own property, so that's why we have entitled or titulo nga nagpamatuod nga tag-iyataan nga piece of land because of this specific human right. So para mas dali lang masabtan, no? So in the right to life, so the conflicts of abortion, while in the right to own property, conflict of illegal settlers. Then in the right to liberty, conflict of communism. Number 3, moral relativism, or also known as a theory of experience. So, is a theory which states that no one person's morals are better or worse than any others. So, for example, marrying cousins, or daghang asawahon in Muslims are morally right as long as mabuhi nila and mahatag nila og unsa man gali ang kinahanglanon sa ilahang asawahonon. So for me, who am I to judge to their practices? Because we have lahi-lahi ta o tinuuhan, lahi-lahi ta practices nga ato ang mga na anda, no? So, in moral relativism, if you against sa karapatan, it is morally wrong. So, normative moral relativism is the idea that all societies should accept each other's differing moral values given that there are no universal moral principles. So, for example, if you are in the Philippines, do as a Philippines. So, unsa man ang kalahian sa moral relativism at normative moral relativism. So, ang moral relativism, it is how people behave. No, how people behave. While in the normative moral relativism, meaning how people should behave.